Well, good afternoon and welcome again to the Getting Started with Jira software webinar. Like Dick mentioned, we'll be spending 40 minutes or so together today. I'm going to start with just a few slides and then follow that with a live demonstration. And again, just to remind you, we'll be recording this for and send out a link for anyone who might have missed it or if you want to review it. And if you have questions as I go along today, feel free to put them in the questions box like Dick said. So again, my name's Alan Reynolds. Just a little bit about me. I joined RightStar as a pre-sales system consultant about 4 years ago. I've got 20 years, more than 20 years now, experience in IT consulting and solution implementation. I've been ITIL Foundation certified for years, and I've also recently become DevOps Foundation certified as well. I'm a Atlassian certified Jira administrator as well as an Atlassian certified Jira service desk administrator. So hopefully what we're doing is right in my wheelhouse today. Enough about me though. Let's talk a little bit about Atlassian. So Atlassian is the vendor, the software vendor that provides the solution we're going to look at today. Atlassian ultimately was a fairly unknown company until they went public a few years ago. But now they're over a $650 million company with over 2,500 employees. And at last official count, they have more than 90,000 organizations are using Atlassian software, including 80 of the Fortune 100. That includes Citigroup and eBay and Coca-Cola and Tesla and NASA. We like to joke and say that Atlassian is the biggest software company you never heard of. Anyway, the Atlassian solution is a purpose-built suite of software, which I'm trying to sort of depict in this slide here, which is modularized for ease of use and flexibility. But then combined together, the solutions make up a well-thought end-to-end solution that can support your organization from software development all the way through service management. So the various pieces of the solution, pardon me, such as Jira Software and Confluence and Bitbucket and Bamboo and Jira Service Desk all are combined together to make up that end-to-end solution to support the application lifecycle, along with a new strategic partnership Atlassian announced last fall with Slack, the IM chat solution. So again, we're going to focus on Jira software today, but I'll also mention a couple other integrated pieces, and we'll spend just a little bit of time on Confluence as well as we go. So Jira software. Jira software is the #1 software development tool used by Agile teams, actually. At its heart, it's an issue and project tracking solution. Atlassian actually came up through the software development side of the house, doing exactly what we're going to look at today, back in the early 2000s with Jira as their original flagship product, as a competitor to Bugzilla back in the day. But ultimately, it grew into that full suite of applications that I mentioned. And about 6 years ago or so, Atlassian surveyed their customer base who were using Jira, and ultimately determined that folks were using Jira for some really specific use cases. So they rebranded Jira and created 3 purpose-built Jira applications. Now they took that original workflow engine and made that Jira Core. Jira Core is appropriate for business teams, marketing, and HR, and that sort of thing for process, project, task management. And Jira Core lets you do all the basic things. You can create a record that they call an issue in the system. It just stands for something to do. To give it a type, which determines the issue type, will determine what workflow it goes through and what fields are available and what screens and who can work on them and those sorts of things. Atlassian took Jira Core and added all the stuff you need to run a service desk to create Jira Service Desk about 4 or 5 years ago now. That ended up adding to Jira Core a customer portal and agent queues and SLAs and internal, external communications and things like that. And then again, on top of Jira Core, they added everything you need to run a software development shop to look at Jira, to create Jira software, which is what we're here to look at today. So ultimately, Jira software is Jira Core plus Agile boards and Kanban boards and burn down reports and sprints and velocities and so on and so forth. And ultimately, if you have Jira in your environment, you have all 3 flavors. It just ends up being which ones you're licensed for. So it's just the licensing that turns on the ability to have those extra features. So ultimately, they can live together and interact together that way. So again, we're going to focus on Jira software today, but I did want to mention that. And it's worth talking a little bit about nomenclature. I mentioned that a record in Jira is called an issue. It's what Atlassian calls it in Jira. It stands for something to do, and again, each issue will have a type that will determine how exactly it behaves. And every issue belongs to a workspace they call a project. So issues in Jira are grouped into workspaces called projects, where permissions are administered and teams are developed and those sorts of things. So one of the tenets really around Jira software and Agile in general is shipping early and often. And Jira software is really built to help every member of your team do that, to be able to plan, to create user stories and issues and plan sprints and distribute tasks across your software team and to track, to prioritize and discuss your team's work within the full context of what you're doing with complete visibility to everything. And to release, to ship with confidence and sanity, knowing that the information you have is always up to date, and to report, to be able to improve your team performance based on real-time visual data that your team can really put to use. One of the key great things about Jira is its configurable workflows, because we know every team has a unique process for developing software. So Jira's workflows are configurable. There's a little example of one here on the screen, but ultimately there's a few that come out of box that you can use as is if you'd like to. If that works for what you need, you can use them as they are. You can take those out of box workflows and tweak them a little bit if you need to just make them a little different to get you where you need, or you can start from scratch and create a brand new workflow to match exactly the way your team works. So all very, very configurable. And one of the things around one of the things around there we go. One of the important parts is to talk about integrations. Now, I mentioned Confluence we'll take a look at in a moment, and that the entire suite of Atlassian solutions are integrated together out of box. But just to mention a few here, Confluence is around knowledge management, and we'll have a slide or two about that in a moment. Well, our particular use case for Confluence in our demo today is around product requirements. Bitbucket is the source code repository management tool that sits atop a Git repository, and Bamboo is the continuous integration CI/CD tool that you can use to do your builds with. Again, both integrated with Jira out of box. Now, one of the great things that Atlassian provides with all of its solutions is an open API. Now, that means that you, if you wanted to, could be using the solutions and decide to customize them to create something with that API, to create additional functionality or extensions to the system or integrations or that sort of thing. But because that API exists, it enables Atlassian to provide this rich ecosystem they call the Atlassian Marketplace, where Atlassian themselves and Atlassian partners provide pre-built add-ons and extensions and integrations to other systems that you can simply just download and install in your system and use those, as opposed to having to develop those yourself. And ultimately, there's over 3,000 Atlassian Marketplace apps that can be added to your system to help you get the most out of Jira software. So Confluence, I mentioned, we'll just got a couple slides here real quick. Confluence is Atlassian's wiki-style collaboration and documentation solution. And just like Jira is made of issues that are grouped into containers called projects, Confluence is made up of pages that are grouped into containers called spaces and then organized into trees. And unlike document and file sharing tools, Confluence is open and accessible, and that really helps your team and your whole company work to do their best together. To create pages by, you can grab one of the handy templates called blueprints in Confluence and begin to use it on a new page so that you aren't starting from scratch every time, and then add your own text and images and GIFs and even emojis. It helps you work better together by improving allowing you to jointly work on pages together and giving feedback to each other through inline comments and page comments and at mentions to your teammates. And to just keep everything organized by grouping related pages together in a dedicated space that you can get to or your team can get to or everyone can get to, if that makes more sense. Confluence is really the place to collaborate. It provides a place to do project planning and meeting notes and product requirements, like I mentioned, we'll look at today, and retrospectives, which we'll also look at, and business plans and blog posts. And just a few features I wanted to call out around Confluence. I mentioned the templates, the blueprints that you can use to create a new page. That there's a powerful search engine. There's a really flexible permissions model around it, just like there is in Jira. You can label pages to help you organize things better. There's some inline task tracking and real-time notifications, and of course page history, which we'll take a look at as we get into that tool a little bit. So enough with the slides. We'll move on now to the live demonstration of Jira software and a little bit of Confluence. And again, just as a reminder, feel free to enter any questions you have in the Q&A box, and we'll have some time at the end of the session to address that. So I'm going to share out my screen, and I hope this works here. I believe that, yeah, there we go. So I should now be sharing out my screen, and everyone should see my live demo environment. I did want to note that WebEx, again, is sometimes a little particular. If the image on your screen right now isn't quite large enough, you should be able to hover over the image, and you'll see a couple of icons to zoom in or zoom out to make it larger if you need to be able to see it a little bit better. So what I want to do today is follow a little scenario through. So it's really worth pointing out that Jira, like I've mentioned, and Confluence are incredibly configurable, which makes them really flexible. It also means that there's really no way to demo them without configuring them. So I've configured my demo system here for some fictitious demo company meeting their fictitious requirements for their fictitious teams. Now, nothing here is hard-coded that we're going to show you today. This is just to give you a flavor for the tool and be able to show you what it looks like and how it behaves in the context of some business process. But ultimately, you would configure the tool to work your process instead of the one I'm going to show you today. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at issue types, those are fully configurable. When we're looking at workflows, those are fully configurable. The fields are configurable. You can add custom fields to your system of text and long text and number and drop down and radio button and checkbox and all those sort of data types. So all that's really configurable, and you can make the system be able to store and report on all the data that you need. So what I want to do today is take a little scenario where we have a project intake request for a new application for my fictitious company. We're going to say that someone is suggesting that we build a little benefit application, a little employee benefit application, so that HR can use it to manage employee benefits, to add and remove benefits from employees. So that's our sort of scenario today, and what I want to do is follow that all the way from the project intake, from the idea of a project, in through an intake process where we evaluate and do some thumbnail estimates and approvals and that sort of thing, and then build our project out and determine exactly what we need to do by collaborating in a Confluence space on that. And then turning that work into Jira issues that can be worked, and we'll take a look how that can be done across Kanban and Scrum Agile teams. So, having said all that, let me go ahead and show you my system. So, when a user logs into Jira, they initially land on a dashboard. So, this is an example of a dashboard. A dashboard is really just a collection of gadgets, they call them, each of these little boxes. Gadgets are just visual representations of data in the system. So I've got a little roadmap gadget here showing my upcoming sprints and or my upcoming versions, and a sprint health gadget here showing the health of a current sprint, and a burn down report, and a little gadget showing me how many days I have left in my sprint, a representation of a wallboard, the activity stream from the system, and counts of issues by type and by assignee, and by charts and bar charts and pie charts and heat maps, and ultimately there's dozens of gadgets that you can add to a dashboard and configure them to show just the data that you need. Now, you define a single default system dashboard, but then you can have as many other dashboards as you want. So if you want to create one for your own use, or a manager for each of the folks on his team, or an admin for each of your divisions, or however you want to manage that, Just as an example, I've got a couple here today. I've got one here that's probably geared from a software developer perspective that we just looked at here around sprints and so on and so forth. Just as by way of contrast, here's one that I developed around more of a service desk perspective around inbound tickets and change requests and incidents and that sort of thing. So ultimately, you can have as many of these as you need, and they can be geared towards whatever perspective or persona you need them to be. And one really great feature of any dashboard is that you can choose to view it as a wallboard. Now that'll take all the gadgets on that on the dashboard and put them on a black background, and then begin scrolling through page by page until it gets back to the beginning, and then it'll start over. And so if you happen to have a TV in a conference room or a support room or a hallway or somewhere that you want to show some statistics from the system, that's just a really easy, quick out-of-box way to do that. So when a user would log into the system and glean whatever information they might need here from the dashboard when they get in the morning or come back from lunch or whatever, they would end up choosing an issue to work with or a project to work with. And again, the base unit in Jira is a record they call an issue that are grouped into containers called projects. So if I had a particular project I wanted to begin working with, I could simply come to my projects menu and I could choose from any project I had access to. Now, of course, this is all permission based. So if I don't have permission to see a particular project, it doesn't even show up in my list. As an admin, you'll see I have a good bit of projects available to me here, but these again would be all restricted as needed in your environment. I'm going to end up choosing to work with this project in Jira I've called my PMO charter list. That's a Kanban style project, and really what I'm using it for here is to keep a record of each of the inbound project requests and what we decided about them and the information we gathered from them, and maybe the ones we rejected and why, and maybe the ones we approved and moved forward and documentation around how they got implemented. So I could just simply go work with that project and begin to work with existing issues there. But I want to create a brand new issue here for you and show you how to do that. So from the dashboard or really anywhere in the system, you'll always have this navigation bar at the top with a create button where you can choose to create a new issue. Now I'm going to click that, and the first thing the system's going to do when it pops up this new dialog box for me to begin to enter the information to create this new issue, which again is configurable. So the fields that are being gathered here are all configurable. The first thing it's going to ask me to do is choose a project. Now, I mentioned I want to use my PMO charter project, but I want you to notice that after I choose a project, I choose a type. So just looking at the project that's already selected here, I just want you to see that we've got some types here of story and task and bug and epic. But in my PMO charter list project, the only viable issue types here are task and project. So you can determine what issue types can live in each project. So in this case, I'm going to start a new project intake request here. And this is going to be for that new employee benefit application that I'd like us to build. And actually, maybe it's not even me. Maybe Betty was the one that suggested this. So maybe I can record her as the one who suggested this new project that we'd like to undertake. I've added an attachment field here. Maybe I come out here and add some sort of Word document around some justification for this that may be required in my environment when I submit a project request. Maybe I, am allowed to give it some sort of ballpark due date. Maybe I say this needs to be finished by the end of the year, for example, or something like that. I could give it a description here. Maybe we'll just say simply that HR is going to use this to manage employee benefits. And in this case, I've added a couple custom fields here. We say maybe our CIO is our sponsor of this, and I don't know, maybe Cameron is our customer here. But again, these fields are fully configurable. I'm going to go ahead and click Create here to create this new issue in my project PMO charter list of type project here. And you'll notice when I do, I get a little pop-up here with my new issue ID, which I can click on and drill down into that new issue, and it displayed on my screen here. Or you could just keep working if that's more appropriate. And if for some reason you happen to miss that pop-up, your most recent issues are listed right here under your Issues menu, which would give you a chance to get right back to this new issue we just created, PMO 32, which is what's on our screen here. So what I can see here is the layout of a Jira issue on my screen. Now, for the most part, all Jira issues are going to look pretty much like this. So we have our summary at the top, and the very first field that we can see here is our type. And again, this is an important field because it always determines how the issue behaves. It'll always be the type of issue that determines the workflow it goes through. I mean, you can always see that workflow that the issue you're working on will need to go through by clicking this View Workflow link beside the status field. So when I do that, it pulls up a little visual representation of that workflow. And ultimately, this is where the power of Jira comes in, the ability to create these workflows to mirror your process. So in this case, in my system, for my project requests, I have them mapped to this workflow I call my PMO project intake workflow. Ultimately, though, a workflow is just a collection of different states that an issue could be in and all of the allowed transitions between them. So I've got states here of open and assigned and planning and in review, rejected, resolved, closed, and in progress. Again, fully configurable. You can have whatever states or statuses that you'd like here. And then you define what the allowed transitions are between them. So initially I come into an open status, and from there I could take this accept transition to move to an assigned state. Or maybe we take this canceled transition to move to a rejected state. But then it's not till I'm in an assigned state that I could take this ready for estimates transition to move to planning and so on and so forth. And then what happens on these transitions? So first of all, who's allowed to make them? So down here, we've got a review process where we either approve or reject this. Maybe I don't want to just allow anyone in my organization to do that. So we can lock down a transition to a particular user or sets of users or groups so that only those people can see and make that transition and other people wouldn't be able to. And on those transitions, what data has to be in what format? So what data is required? Maybe I need to, as I move into an approval, maybe I need to gather a billing code or an accounting code or something. But maybe as I'm rejecting, I need to gather a rejection reason. So you're able to define those sorts of things. And then on those transitions, what happens? Do I want to notify someone that this issue was created or resolved? Or do I want to update a field? Maybe when the ticket gets assigned, I want to automatically assign it to the current user. Or maybe using an app from the marketplace, like we'll see, we would want to create automatically a couple of subtasks on an issue at the right point in the workflow. And we'll see an example of that in a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and put on my PMO hat here, and we'll say I've received this new request, and I need to do some initial evaluation on it. We're either going to accept or cancel this right up front. So maybe if Betty had suggested we roll back to Windows 95, we'd say, no, thank you. That's a really dumb idea, and we just cancel this right up front. But we like the idea of this employee benefit application, so I'm going to accept this, choose the accept transition, which I've defined here to move me to an assigned state, and it automatically assigned it to me, the issue to me here. So I can begin working, and maybe I begin collecting some data, and I can make some comments down here. So I'll add some comment here where I can document what I've determined about this issue or about this request. I can add more attachments here by coming up and adding attached files here, just as I did when I submitted it. So if I had more files I needed to attach, I could. Also, maybe I need to reach out to somebody. Maybe I have a few questions. In a comment on any Jira issue at any time, you can choose to @mention. So I could @mention maybe Allison here and ask her, what should we do? Or whatever my question might be. I'll add that comment to the issue, and of course anyone viewing this issue could see that comment. But because Allison was @mentioned, she'll be sent an email notification to let her specifically know that she's been looped in here on this issue. So she can either reply to that email and it would become a new comment on the issue, or she could follow the link in the email into the system and review and respond there. So in that way, you can have a conversation in line writing comments on an issue. So at some point, maybe we have documented enough. We've made enough notes, and we've gathered enough documents and attachments or whatever, and we're ready to send this for some thumbnail estimates. So part of my fictitious company's project intake process is to allow a couple of our teams to give us a ballpark LOE when we get new projects. So I've baked that into this particular workflow so that when I click the Ready for Estimates transition, again using a little app from the Atlassian Marketplace, the system automatically generates a couple of subtasks right here on my issue for Quincy Quality Assurance to come give me an estimate for the QA team, what they think it's going to take to test this thing, and for Daisy Developer to give me an estimate on what she thinks her team will take to create this new app. So Quincy and Daisy would be notified by email, and they could follow those links into the system and review the information I've provided and what Allison contributed here. And Daisy could drill down, or Quincy could drill down into his QA task here, and he could choose to edit that. And he maybe, after talking to his group, thinks it's going to take a couple of weeks for them to do this. So, when he enters that, you can see his estimation here that he's estimated a couple weeks for this thing, sort of thumbnail ballpark. But as I pop back up to the main issue that subtask is under, I can see here that Quincy has submitted some estimate, and I can see in my sidebar a roll-up of that 2 weeks. So as Daisy comes in and does the same thing for her dev team, and she says, I don't know, maybe it'll take them 6 weeks. Her 6-week estimate, again, is marked on her subtask. But now up at the main level, I can see a full 8 weeks or so that we're ballparking for this thing to be done. So in that way, I can gather some estimates and really get a feel for the LOE that we're thinking this is going to take. So I wanted to show you another little piece here that I've borrowed from my demo system here today from SAFe, the Scaled Agile framework. Jira is really good at managing individual projects here. But when you have a bunch of projects to analyze against each other, how do you do that? It's pretty easy to say, well, we'll just do the easiest one, or we'll do the hardest one, or the longest one, or the one with the most benefit. But there's this construct that came about through SAFe, the Scaled Agile framework, called WSJF, Weighted Shortest Job First. It's a way to apply a ranking in several different aspects to a project or to an issue, and evaluate it, and then come up with a number that represents all of those aspects that you can then compare projects against each other with. So I'm going to edit this issue, and I'm going to fill out those custom fields I added to my system for those WSJF attributes or capacities, you might want to say. So we're going to say, and these in that Scaled Agile framework are done with a Fibonacci scale, much like story pointing, the 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21 sort of thing. So we're going to say from a business value, this buys us a good bit. We'll say it's an A. That really buys us some business value. From a time criticality perspective, maybe it's kind of a medium. It doesn't really matter if it happens, but it would be nice to get it done. Maybe from a risk reduction or opportunity enablement, it doesn't really provide us a whole lot from that perspective, so maybe I'll say it's a 1. And maybe we, based on those estimates, say that our duration ends up at about a 3, given how we normally scope things. That 8-week estimate's about a 3 for us. I'm going to click Update here, and again, using a little app from the Marketplace that allows me to do some calculations on the back end, I'm able to calculate this cost of delay right from my business value, criticality, and risk reduction, which gets me to a total of 14, which we then divide, according to this formula, by the job duration to get us a WSJF, a weighted shortest job first value of probably 6 repeating, but it says 4.667. Now, I could take that value and then compare that to other projects in my environment and really be able to compare apples to apples that way when they may not have much else in common. So maybe I've documented everything I need for this now, and I'm ready to submit this for approval. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then maybe this issue sits until our biweekly or bi-monthly or however often we meet to review projects. And at that point, maybe we sit down in front of a list of things about to be approved. I want to show you a few options for that, just some ideas. One might be just a standard Kanban board. I'm going to open that up and show you. What we have here is just a Kanban board I've called my project intake board, where I've got a bunch of new projects here I'm ready to evaluate that I could then move to approved or canceled, and then maybe once they're approved, I can move them into my project pipeline. I want to show you another option for a similar board, but this one, I've included the WSJF stuff in it, so that on this example, my Kanban board is actually done in swim lanes by WSJF value. So I can see my 9 here from a WSJF puts me in the over 8 swim lane. I've got a few here that fall in that 5 to 8 range, and a few in the 3 to 5 range, and a few at the bottom here. And I can see some that are already in progress, and a few we've canceled here, and a few that we need to evaluate. Or maybe if you don't want to do it with a board, even just a saved filter, just a saved query like this, where I could get down to my list of projects that need to be evaluated, and I can drill down into each of these and evaluate them and discuss them and decide what to do. So what I want to show you here, we'll just use this one, is that maybe we can, during this meeting, select each of these new projects we need to talk about and review details about it, and look at the comments made and the attachments and so on and so forth, and we can decide what we want to do with this, and maybe we decide we do indeed want to, well, actually, maybe if we wanted to reject it, maybe I could drag and drop to my rejected column, and at that point, I would be asked for a rejection reason. But actually, we don't want to do that. So instead, I'm going to drag and drop that to my approved column. And in this case, because I'm approved, my system for my fictitious company is asking me for an account code now that I'm approving this request. And now we can see that that request is in the approved column and has been wrapped up. And this is just a great visual way to interact with your data that way. So I'm going to go back to my issue and refresh, and we'll see that it is now in progress because it has been approved. Now it's time for me to really dig in and flesh out what it's going to take to do this thing. So I want to get a Confluence space started to collaborate on that. Now, rather than have you watch me do that, I've done that ahead of time. And I'm going to link that new Confluence space, which I would create now in the process. And I'm going to choose to link the home page here of my Confluence space dedicated to this employee benefit application project to my project intake issue. And as I open up that new Confluence page, I can see that I have a reverse direction back to a reverse link back to that project intake request. So what we're looking at now is Confluence. I mentioned we'd get here. Confluence, again, is the wiki-style collaboration documentation tool. And what I want to show you here today specifically is around product requirements. This space in Confluence I've dedicated to this employee benefit application, and on my landing page here, I can see that I'm jumping ahead a little bit in time here to where our team has sat down and fleshed out some tasks to be done and grouped them into some epics. So we've decided there's going to be 7 different epics to do this project. We've got to remove benefits, add benefits. We have to be able to view the employee data, and we need some error handling just to get this out the door. So we've grouped that into a version 1. We've made our version 2 the ability to do a batch update of more than one employee at a time and maybe print in that employee data. And for whatever reason, we've set our employee notifications when benefits are updated can wait till our last version. I can see the roadmap of where we're going with that here. I can see the team who's responsible for this. I can have a view down into Jira issues around that, some recently updated Confluence pages. So ultimately, you can tailor Confluence to just show you exactly the data you need here too. And what I can see is that I've finalized the documentation status on all of my epics except this last one, and I can see the Jira issues for my first release are completed and my second release are in progress here. But maybe it's time to finalize these requirements for my employee notifications, so I'm going to open up that page. Now, this page was created with a blueprint called the Product Requirements Blueprint, stamped on the page, ready for me to enter data into it, where I could put in my version number and the epic it relates to and the status and the team working on this and a goal here to notify when benefits have been updated. I've got a place here in the center of this blueprint to list requirements. Now, ultimately, these boil down to user stories. And in this case, I need to add benefits, notify when benefits are added, notify when they're removed. Those two stories take care of this epic. And using, again, an app from the marketplace, but this time an app for Confluence called Glyphy. It's a Visio style sort of tool that allows you to do org charts and flow charts and wireframes like this. I've been able to mock up exactly what I want it to look like. So I enter an ID here, I get this screen, I can click to add, click to remove benefits. If I add here, I want to see this page if I'm removing. My success page looks like this, and if I error, I want to see this page. So ultimately, you can document everything that you need to do after collaborating together right here on the page for this epic. And maybe we'll just say now this has actually been completed, our documentation is finalized. We'll maybe mark this as final and change that color to green there and update that page so now everyone knows that these requirements have been finalized. As a point here, on any Confluence page at any time, you can come to page history to view a list of exactly who updated the page when. And you can choose to display, to compare a couple of versions to see what was added in green and removed in red and where formatting was changed in blue there. So you can see exactly what happened. Once we got this document finalized, though, with our requirements, I want to show you this really neat functionality. If you have Jira and Confluence in your system together on any Confluence page at any time, you can highlight and hover. Now, the first option I get here is just a Confluence option to comment inline like you would in a Word document when you highlight some text and add a comment. The other option here allows me to create a Jira issue right from this Confluence page. I'll select that, and what it brings up is a little dialog that gathers some information from me about what issues I want to create. Now, it assumes I want to create a single one, but it gives me this option to create multiples because it noticed I'm on a table field. And then it just says where you want to put them, what project. I'll put them in our employee benefit project, and we'll make them stories. I click create, and the system will spin through and automatically generate Jira issues, my new 38 and 39 here, for that work to be done. And as I drill down into one of those new issues, you can see that we have a reverse relationship back to those requirements. So I can see exactly what I'm working on as I work it. What you'll notice here is now I'm on a Jira issue in a Jira Software Agile Scrum project with my backlog and sprints and releases and reports and so on and so forth. And this new issue, I'll show you, as I click on my backlog tab, actually showed up at the back of my backlog. So I had a few things in my backlog here that had already been added and estimated. We have two brand new ones that have showed up because I sent them over from Confluence when those requirements were ready. So I'm going to pretend now that we're doing our story pointing and our backlog grooming with my team, and we can sit down again in front of this screen on a monitor or on WebEx or something like that, and we can talk about these issues and see what we think it'll take to do them. Maybe after discussing this added benefit story, we think maybe it's 5 story points. I can enter that right here, and you can see now we can see that it's been estimated as 5 story points in my backlog here. And maybe it's a little easier to do the notifying of removal once you've already added. So we'll maybe just say that's a 1. So now I've got my backlog fully story pointed after my planning poker is completed. And it's time to load up some sprints. So ultimately what I can see in my backlog is our current sprint that's going on and a few sprints that I've created using this create sprint button that are empty, ready for me to load them up. But the big question is, how much do I put in a sprint? Well, we've got a report for that. So I'm going to come real quick to my reports tab here, and you can see a full list of the reports that are available in each Jira software project. The one I want to call out right now is this velocity chart, which has been keeping track of my team's velocity here at pretty much a 12-point clip. So I know I can handle about 12 points as I go to load up new sprints. So to do that, I can simply drag and drop into a sprint. So I'm going to move this one up into sprint 8. I see that I've loaded up 5 story points. So I guess I can add 7 more to get up to my 12 for my current velocity for this team. I could also just right click and send to a sprint. So I can send it to that sprint that way. And now I see I've loaded up 12. So I should probably stop with that one. I can also just drag my sprint down into my backlog, and I see I've gathered 3, now 6, and now 9, and now 12 points. So I've loaded up my sprint 9 here with things to be done as well for a total of 12. So in that way, you can help do some backlog grooming and sprint loading based on your team's velocity. Here on our Active Sprints tab, we see anything that's active. So this is current work. We've added those new issues to our backlog, but these are things that are going on right now, and I can see the summary from each of these. I can see the state they're in. I can see the epic they're related to. I can see who's assigned to them. I can see the story points. It's a great visual representation of things. So every morning at stand up, we can stand in front of this board on a monitor or in front of WebEx on our computer screens or whatever, and we can talk through what's going on. So I can see that, maybe this issue has been blocked by something, but maybe that blocker's gone. So maybe I want to remove that flag from this one so that we can show that it's ready to be moved. As I work through items, I can drag and drop and show that they've been done. I can open any of these up in another tab to work with them directly if I need to. Maybe at some point I would need to log some work on these. So as I'm working at any point, I can choose to log work. So when I do that, maybe I can say I spent a couple hours on this. Maybe I worked on this some yesterday, so we'll say that was yesterday. I can go ahead and log that work. When I do, any work that I logged shows up here on my work log tab, so I can see there was an instance where I logged work, and I can see a roll up here in my sidebar of the 2 hours I spent on that. And if this story had been estimated, it would be logging subtracted from the remaining time, so I can see an estimate of what's remaining. If I maybe also need to add some work for today, we'll say I spent another, 4 hours today on that. Again, we've got a second instance here, so I can see I've declared work twice for a total of 6 hours here, so we can keep track of that. And those are even included up from the subtasks as well, like we saw early in our demo today. So back on my active sprint board, we can just choose to go ahead and move these through their paces through our sprint as we go, and eventually we will have everything completed by the end of our sprint. I know I've got 12 days remaining here, but I'm going to go ahead and, for our purposes today, complete this sprint out. When I do, it'll confirm for me what I want to do. Now, in this case, I've completed all my issues, but if you had any open issues, it would ask you what you'd like to do with those. At this point, I can go ahead and choose to complete that sprint, and I'm brought to a page here where I can review what's happened, and I can choose to create a brand new retrospective here in Confluence, where maybe we'll say this is our sprint 7 retrospective. I would add some more information there maybe. And again, I'm brought to a brand new Confluence page on my retrospective template, ready to say who participated in this meeting, what we did well this time, what we could have done better, who we want to kill, and what action items we might have from this thing. Then I can publish that page, and it'll be stored permanently here right with the sprint, so that people can access that retrospective right here from the sprint report. Now, we're running toward the end here, so the last thing I really want to show you is around reporting. Now, we've seen a lot of really good reporting directly from the dashboard, and we've also seen reports here inside of each Jira project that are some canned reports and ones you can create yourself around burn down and velocity and burn up and so on and so forth. But I also wanted to show you at any point as a user in the system, you can choose to come to your search for issues option here, and you land on the issue navigator. And from this screen, you can search for any issue you have access to in the system. Now, again, it's all permissions based. So if you don't have access to see an issue, it won't show up here. But I can then begin to just say, maybe I only want to see things in my employee benefit application project, and maybe I only want to look at main issue types and not subtasks, and maybe I want to filter by assignee or status or something like that. But ultimately, I can get down to a list here that I can interact with. I can drill down into these and take action. I can also export these, so I can send them to Word, CSV, XML, so I can shoot them off to somebody if I need to. And there's a couple of really great options that allow you to save a search and what you can do once you do. So if I save a search, it becomes a filter. So we'll just call this my saved search. Or maybe we'll call it my saved filter since that's what it's called. Filter. Once I save a search as a filter, I get a couple additional options here to share this with anyone else who might want to use this. but also to create a subscription, which says to me or a particular team on this schedule, I want the system to send the results of that saved filter. So maybe every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, you have a list of all the issues that are on your plate this week or that missed their due dates last week or whatever you can think of, really. You can have it automatically delivered to your inbox as the results of that saved filter at any point. So that's about what I had to show you today from a software perspective for getting started with Jira software. I guess maybe at this point we'll see what questions might have come in, and maybe Dick, what are people talking about?
Sure. Well, great job, Alan. Now would be a good time, by the way, to ask a question. There's a Q&A box. If you have a question, go ahead and type that in right now, and we can get to it. If not before the top of the hour, we'll send you a response back. But one of the things that, Alan, I wanted to ask about is, oftentimes you think about good DevOps principles, and it's trying to get Dev and Ops all working together on the same page. And oftentimes Jira is thought of nothing more than a bug tracker. So somebody says, yeah, I've got Jira, we're tracking all the bugs that we have in the software development system that we're trying to get going with. And yet you can have, in Jira itself, you can have, you can track, and then in other service desks, you can track different incidents and so on. But wouldn't it be better to have just one system that sort of handles that? And so if a call comes in, for example, it might be that if this application is not working, we need to track it down. I found a bug. And so you'd be able to, essentially handle that incident, and then you could route it to the same team. You wouldn't have to worry about, wait a minute, this is a developer, I'm not sure what to do with that. So how do organizations typically handle these sorts of requests, of getting everybody under the same umbrella and kind of getting Dev and Ops working together, maybe with one system instead of two?
I think it ultimately started in a kind of a grassroots way with Atlassian. So they, again, came up through the software development side of the house, but found out going on 10 years ago now that customers, despite what they intended people to use the software for, were using it for other things. And one specifically, 40% of their customer base was using Jira as a service desk. So they said, hey, you know what? We probably should have some purpose-built features for that. And so that's where Jira Service Desk came from. And ideally, that's you'd be on the entire platform beginning to end, so that a new project intake request that we just did directly in the tool might have come in from an unlicensed end-user customer requesting an update. At that point, the service desk team working in a Jira Service Desk project could receive and triage that new request from the portal. And again, maybe decide it's not something we want to do and close it out and say, no, thank you, customer, but also could forward that on to the PMO team to further review and move into the process we looked at today. Also, as folks are using existing software, reporting bugs and defects, being able to come to a portal or even send in an email to create a brand new Jira issue in Service Desk that could then be triaged and evaluated and maybe related to an existing bug over in Jira software, or maybe a new bug request needs to be created over there related to that Service Desk request. Ultimately, what you find is when you're on the same system, information flows a lot more smoothly, and just eliminating a swivel chair action between two systems saves everyone a lot of time.
Right, and you could integrate. Let's say you were using Remedy or ServiceNow, you could certainly integrate that into Jira then as well, right?
Yeah, you bet, and that's where that open API comes in. So there's even some apps in the marketplace around those very things you just said. But if you run into a case where there isn't something already available, it can be built.
Okay. You also mentioned a little bit about SAFe and what was called WSJF. Atlassian has a new product now called Jira Aligned that I think uses the SAFe framework then. And I think it's maybe for enterprises, or it's for, especially when you get into managing multiple projects.
Well, I think it's multiple environments, really. So that's a really good thing to point out. What Jira does great out of the box is managing a project. So you create a Jira project, you add all the people that are going to work on your business project, you add all the tasks that need to be done, you order them and create dependencies between them and work them through to completion till your project's done. What Jira doesn't do super great right out of the box is how do I look at 100 projects I've got going on? And Atlassian offers a solution for that they offer in the Atlassian Marketplace, an add-on for Jira called Portfolio for Jira that helps organize across a Jira instance all of the multiple projects so that we can have multiple Jira projects with the same release, maybe working across teams towards a common goal, that sort of thing. So Portfolio is that first sort of project portfolio level above the Jira projects. Jira Align is actually a step above Portfolio to be managing enterprise-wide across potentially multiple Jira servers, potentially other technologies as well, and other types of project management. So it's really at that sort of enterprise level around enterprise direction. So it's really a stair step up from Jira to Portfolio to Jira Align.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Well, here's a question. It says, how is the solution licensed?
Well, so ultimately, it's all done by user tier. So you don't pay anything specifically for the server itself. I think some things are licensed that way. The only thing you pay for is users, and they're all done in tiers, and it depends on the product and the deployment option, but maybe the tiers are 0 to 10 and 11 to 25 and 26 to 50, and you pick the user license tier that fits your team. And ultimately, usually ends up giving you a little bit of room to grow as well, because you're not buying, 13 licenses for 13 people. You might be buying 15. And then again, it varies a little by deployment option. So there's a couple different ways to deploy Jira. There is an Atlassian cloud version of this. We were looking today at the on-prem server version of that, which would be a single on-prem server. And there's also a data center deployment option, which is multiple on-prem servers talking to the same database. So you have multiple nodes that are concurrent at the same time to provide that enterprise level, high availability, disaster recovery, zero downtime upgrades, and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you. All right. Well, I think we've pretty much come to the end. Is there another slide here, how to contact?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I should have scrolled on there
so
we get to that.
Why don't we put that one up? So I certainly wanted to thank everybody that spent the last hour or so listening in, and I hope you got something out of this of value. If you'd like more information, here's different ways to get in touch with us. If you want to figure out how to get started with your own Jira software, we'd certainly like to help you. We can get you with a demo copy. We can certainly give you some advice about that. We offer, obviously, consulting. We offer implementation. We offer training services all around Jira, and hopefully get you off to a good start, and you can become one of the 90,000 organizations that are out there that are already using Jira. So with that, I think, Alan, thanks for an excellent job, and thanks, everybody, for your time this afternoon. I hope you can join us the next time. We do these on a regular basis, about every 2 weeks or so, and I'm sure you're on our list, and you'll get invited to the next webinar we have. But till next time, thank you again, and signing off from RightStar. Enjoy the rest of the day. So long, everybody.